and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Khademian, the Executive Director of USG. On today's show, we're going to focus on workforce development, what exactly it is, and how it helps to enhance economic stability and prosperity by focusing on both the people that make up the local workforce and the employers that hire them. In Montgomery County, the organization that drives these workforce development efforts and strategies is the nonprofit WorkSource Montgomery, which launched in 2016 when the function was privatized and detached from being a county agency. Joining me to discuss the important work of WorkSource Montgomery and how it connects job seekers and employers is the Executive Director, Anthony Featherstone. Anthony, welcome to This is USG.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. Anthony, I think let's start with an introduction and would love to have you talk a little bit about your own personal journey into the policy space around workforce development, maybe a little bit of your background, but I'm going to ask you to cue off of one thing I read in particular. So looking at some of your earlier interviews, you were asked about the most important personal source of influence on your life, and you highlighted your father and his values and the inspiration that he gave you for the work that you do and for your leadership. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that inspiration and the importance of your father and some of in your life, and then maybe how that connects to the work that you do. You highlighted in that article some of the values that you embrace that were so important, that were kind of drilled into you as part of your experience with your growing up with your father. I wonder if you could talk about how the experience, your father's influence on your life, and the path that you've chosen as well.
Yeah, and I'd be delighted to talk about that, and I'll try not to get emotional because I really appreciate my journey and how much my father had an influence on my journey up to this point and beyond and moving forward. So I am a native Washingtonian. Grew up in this area, mostly between Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County. Graduated high school and went to college to play football, not to get an education. At 18 years old, I was only going to play football, and luckily I wised up and get smart and serious about education and realized that there was more of a life after football than there was within football. But went to a little school in South Carolina called Coastal Carolina University and got a bachelor's degree in sociology. And I heard about literally this magical place called the American Job Center that could help me put my degree in sociology to work. So I walked in literally the Monday after graduation and walked in with sweats and long hair, and I walked out with a job as a case manager. Didn't know what I was doing. Was happy to get a government job with benefits as a case manager in the Workforce Investment Act program, now known as WIO, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I'll try not to bore you with too many workforce acronyms, but I helped the gentleman get a CDL, get a job, and see the direct effects of him getting into a career pathway and how it affected him individually, as well as his family, as well as his community as a whole, because we stayed in touch for a long time after, we worked together on that level. And I said workforce is exactly where I want to be. So ended up getting a master's degree in business to help learn the business side of things, and ended up progressing in workforce development, did workforce in South Carolina and other states, and had an opportunity to move back home to do workforce development here for a private company, and traveling all around the country to see different workforce organizations and how they did business, and had the opportunity to make an impact in Montgomery County about 18 months ago, and gladly stepped into this role to help Montgomery County out from a workforce development standpoint, in getting folks into career pathways and into the middle class My journey, I think, is unique to myself, as everybody's journey is. But my father and what he instilled in me, and just being a hardworking man, a man that took his responsibilities serious, a man who was selfless, and always put others before himself, really is one thing that's carried me through from educational endeavors to professional endeavors and so forth, and just really putting people first and being people centered at whatever I do in workforce and in my personal life has really been something that I think has allowed me to excel, has allowed me to make a bigger impact, and to be in this position that I'm in right now. So that's our philosophy. We want to help people that need the most help get into whatever career pathway they want to get into. And we want to develop and design programs that are people centered. I think sometimes when you run government programs, federally funded programs, it can be a lot of tape. It could be really daunting to get to services. And we always, as an organization, want to make sure that you not just know what we do, but you can get to and access our services in a way that makes sense for you where you are. So if you want to know about my father's impact on me, it just it resonates in everything I do, day in and day out in my personal and professional life, and how you treat people. It's kind of the golden rule. You don't treat people as you want to be treated, but treat people as they want to be treated. You've got to get to know them as a person first to be able to do that. So that's what I do, and that's what we try to do as an organization, as a workforce system as a whole.
Wow, what a great story. And I love the connection that you respect people, you treat people the way that not only you'd like to be treated, but how they need to be treated as well. And your own personal story of going in and getting a job, walking in without a job, leaving with a job, and what an impact that probably had on you as a young man to have that experience, and then to be able to give that experience to others as well. That's fantastic. I will say we share something in common, Anthony, that I was an athlete as well, and really just wanted to run and run and run. And, it took actually I didn't know at the time, but my future husband telling me I better get serious with school, because I wasn't going to be able to run forever.
Yeah, it took a few bills coming in for me to know that I needed to find employment. So I definitely get it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that story about your father as well. That's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about Worksource Montgomery, the agency itself. Some of our listeners may not be familiar with Worksource Montgomery or workforce development agencies more generally. Can you tell us a little bit about, what is the mission, and what is the work look like on an annual basis? What are some of the things you're trying to achieve in Montgomery County?
Yeah, sure. So the workforce system is defined by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, more commonly known or referred to as WIOA. So the WIOA legislation defines what the system should look like nationwide, which trickles down to all 50 states, and of course the local workforce areas in each state. In Maryland, we have 13 local workforce areas, Montgomery County being a single county workforce area. And I think you'll hear workforce put in a lot of elaborate terms, but we like to keep it simple. Our job is to make sure that we connect talent to opportunity. And on the reverse end, we make sure the opportunity has the talent that they need to grow and thrive. So what does that mean? We have a supply and demand equation. The demand is the employer side. So we're always working with local employers to figure out what they need from a talent perspective. Which helps drive our strategy in developing partnerships and developing programs and so forth, so that when we work with our local job seekers and finding maybe stopgap jobs or connecting them to training that will lead to sustainable career pathways, that we're training folks and placing folks in opportunities that make sense for them as an individual, but for the needs of our local economy. So it's a lot of case management, because we know that life happens, and we want to make sure that we're working with communities that may be under-resourced, or I don't like to use the term vulnerable, but that's a term that we hear bounced around a lot, to support folks as they go through our programs and get into and finish training and get into our placement or job placement programs. So it's a lot about just making the connection between the demand from our local business community and making sure that our local job seekers have the training and opportunities to get into those positions. And it looks different in every area. From the standpoint of each local economy is different. Everybody has high growth industries that may be nuanced throughout the state and throughout the region, but typically services are similar. So I always let folks know that Worksource Montgomery is not the only show in town. There's a workforce agency in every county in every state in America. And we're typically referred to as the best kept secret, which I think, since the pandemic started is something that's changing. Employers are more aware of our services. Job seekers are more aware of our services. We've had to shift to be able to meet folks virtually instead of just in person, which has expanded our reach. And we're just, really focused on the 16,000 plus or minus unemployed job seekers and the even more job seekers that may be disconnected or discouraged due to the pandemic, to get them into the labor force, get them trained, and get them into good paying jobs or employment pathways.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for that overview. It's very helpful. You started to mention the pandemic and how there's more awareness of Worksource Montgomery, the programs that you offer because of the pandemic. I wonder if you could talk about the impact of the pandemic more generally on workforce development and on the work of Worksource Montgomery. We know that there has been a lot of shifting of the economy. We know that many people lost jobs during the pandemic. The pandemic is still ongoing in some ways. It still is seeing surges here and there. The economy is also changing a great deal. People are wanting to work from home and remotely, and new industries have emerged, and other industries have suffered and struggled. What do you see as, kind of an overview? What are some of the highlights of the impact of the pandemic on the work of Worksource Montgomery and workforce development more generally?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like maybe not just Worksource or workforce development, but almost everybody in general that's gone through this pandemic has had to be forced into a more creative space than I think we may have been in prior to March of 2020, and having to shift 100% to virtual service delivery, then shift to a hybrid model, and that ebbs and flows based on Delta, Omicron variants, and so forth. So it's put us in and I think our state, from a workforce development standpoint, in a different mindset. We have a kind of a model here at Worksource that we want every Montgomery County resident to have access to economic opportunity. And we know that's a broad goal that's probably bigger or larger than our scope. But what it forces us to do is to think a certain way when we develop partnerships and programs and so forth. So, we've deployed, some creative tactics. I think we have a mobile job center that's launching in September of this year to meet job seekers and businesses where they're at. We have a virtual job center that we've deployed. We've created continue to cultivate some smart partnership, one being with you all at the universities of Shady Grove to offer bio boot camps for entry-level skills training in the life sciences field. And we're just making sure that our partnerships build bridges that haven't typically been as strong or been at the forefront as much pre-pandemic, to make sure that we're serving job seekers from various walks of life, to make sure that everybody has opportunity, whether you're a returning citizen, an English learner, a disconnected youth or whatnot, that there's opportunity for you to grow and advance in your career.
Yeah, you mentioned the boot camp. So we'll talk more about universities at Shady Grove too, but you did mention the bio boot camps. This has been a really successful program with Worksource Montgomery, that also with Montgomery College and the universities at Shady Grove, two different programs, but giving people a chance to pivot into new careers or new opportunities. Is this a good example of some of the programs that Worksource offers? This kind of pivoting opportunity? Is this a a kind of specialized category of programs that WorkSource offers in terms of helping people transition from maybe one job to another or building new career sets. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, and so I think it's an outstanding example of partnership that meets the need of a specific industry. We actually provide funding for training in all different fields. Whether you want to be an IT help desk administrator, you want to get your CDL and become a Class B or Class A driver, or you want to be a clinical medical assistant. But I think that the Bio Bootcamp with USG, Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, Montgomery College Worksource Montgomery is a great example of coming together to meet the need of a specific underserved population as well as an industry as a whole, where USG Montgomery College provided the instruction. WorkSource Montgomery helped to find the participants and support them along the way, and we all worked together to ensure that they were able to get into entry-level positions once they finished training. And one thing I'll say about Montgomery County is that we are very program and asset rich when it comes to services that are available and the appetite for collaboration. The Bio Bootcamp is just one example. We've worked with Montgomery College to stand up a green pre-apprenticeship recently that just completed. And we have, I think 9 or 10 out of 12 students that are going on to registered apprenticeships. And that's just another example of putting, specialized training on the ground for residents to, upskill and get into pathways that really will allow them to earn a livable wage. Not the livable wage that we see online, because sometimes that doesn't equate to being able to live and thrive in Montgomery County, but to really get into higher wage paying jobs. So I think those are two examples of really many programs and many collaborations that are going on right now to upscale our residents.
That's great. I really appreciate your emphasis on collaboration. You at WorkSource Montgomery at one point was an agency, was a government agency, and now is a nonprofit entity. And you've highlighted the importance of collaboration and working together, which I see you model this in your leadership every day. You do an amazing job of building partnerships and building, groups of partners to do the work, and not seeing it as just the responsibility of WorkSource Montgomery, but very much a collaborative responsibility. Could you talk a little bit about how being a nonprofit entity as opposed to a government agency drives or motivates some of the work you do, especially around partnerships?
And I really appreciate those words. I'm growing and learning as a leader day in and day out. And I guess before I speak to the public and private, I'll just kind of speak to your first point. And I think more than other areas, or more so than other areas, I think we really get it from a workforce development standpoint in Montgomery County. Workforce development is bigger than just WorkSource Montgomery. We develop our workforce through K through 12 education, Montgomery County Public Schools, post-secondary, Montgomery College, universities at Shady Grove, as well as some of our smaller local training providers that provide short-term skills training credentials. And everybody really coming together just shows the high spirit of collaboration that really, it was easy for me to be myself as a collaborator because the spirit of collaboration was already here. So I really appreciate that. And it's something that I think is a model for other jurisdictions. But the part about moving from public to private is a trend that we're seeing in workforce development. Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, in the state of Maryland, both have the same setup as Montgomery County, where their workforce development organizations are nonprofits. And really it was designed to do a few things. Number one, to allow us to be more nimble than large government agencies or organizations. As a smaller nonprofit, we can pivot when it comes to policies, procedures, going after different funding sources to be more responsive to kind of what's going on in our local economy. And I think that proved to be a value add or an advantage when the pandemic hit, because Worksource Montgomery was able to quickly pivot to meet the needs of the folks that we serve. And I really think that is the main focus, and it helps us diversify funding to be able to go after other funding sources that are less restrictive than some of our federal funds, in which at this point, kind of allows for a more cleaner canvas, a blank canvas to create in partnership with our partners to come up with some proofs of concept that hopefully we can scale and grow down the line.
Really interesting. Just, a lot of times we just think about an organization as an organization, but the source of funding, the structure, the relationship to the community, the sources of authority, these make a big difference in the strategies that we can pursue. And the Worksource Montgomery is a really interesting example of that. So thank you for that explanation. I read also in one of your interviews, you highlighted the importance of really developing a strong sense of diversity, equity, inclusion, and including this in organizational strategies, workforce strategies, as one of the most important conversations we need to be having and actions we need to be taking. And clearly throughout the pandemic and during, following the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement and other rights movements have really highlighted for us the importance of this within organizations. Our county is a majority minority county, and the workforce is changing dramatically. Could you say more about the role that Worksource Montgomery can play in supporting greater diversity, equity, inclusion practices and strategies within organizations, and why this is so important today as well?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. And I think the first thing that we had to do is we had to educate ourselves on what diversity, equity, and inclusion really is, and go through that edification process. And we're fortunate to have two boards, our local workforce development board and our nonprofit board of directors that have awesome directors in leadership. Stu Edelstein, who I'm sure you're familiar with, your predecessors on our Worksource Montgomery board of directors. And everybody on both of our boards really has DE&I in their heart. And I think that's where it starts. So we start at the board level with our board composition, and we make sure that we have those critical conversations that make sense when it comes to DE&I. For example, we really had to take a hard look at our programs and our data over a year ago to see if our services were really impactful in the communities that we should be servicing. And the data, not shockingly, but the data revealed that we needed to do a better job at finding and reaching those who needed our help most. And what we saw was that those with higher barriers, lower skilled, were not typically walking through our doors on their own, but those with higher skills and lower barriers, because of lower barriers, were walking through our doors at a higher rate. So we committed to looking at the data on a month in and month out basis. We created a community impact team to ensure that we were building relationships in the community with faith-based, community-based government organizations to make sure that everybody in the community know who we are, what we do, and how to access our services. And then, once again, we look at the data on the back end to make sure that our services are diverse from a race and ethnicity standpoint, from a zip code or geographical standpoint as well. And we make sure that we bounce that data up against census tracts to ensure that our outreach efforts and our services are where the need is most prevalent. And sometimes, data can make you a little upset because it doesn't lie, and it'll reveal that you're doing, great or not so great. And it revealed that we weren't doing as good as we needed to do. But as a board and as a staff, we were able to course correct to make sure that we're in the jail offering services to our MCCF or Montgomery County Correctional Facility inmates. We have a community-based reentry program. We have bridge programs for English learners with Mikhail, the Literacy Council of Montgomery County. We have added or additional disconnected youth or young adult programs. So we've tried to be intentional with making sure that our services are designed and easily accessible to who we're supposed to help, quite frankly, by legislation and by law. These are not things that should be foreign. So the data drives us, the community feedback drives us. We really try to think critically and continuously improve the quality of our services with that feedback from a quantitative and anecdotal perspective as we speak to community leaders.
That's great. You know, the former president of UMBC, Freeman Rabowski, who just recently retired, he talks about the empowered university. The empowered university is the university that looks honestly at its data and really uses the data to drive decision making, and not just towards the things we want to measure, the things we want to show, but all of it. So I really appreciate what you're saying about taking a hard look at the impact of our practices, and this is the step we all need to be taking. It's not easy in organizations, but it's so important. So thank you for doing that. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about the universities at Shady Grove and our role in workforce development. You were kind enough to highlight that partnership that is there with USG and Montgomery College and MCPS and other educational institutions in the region as well. One of the things that we're doing, which you know because you've kindly served on our strategic planning process as well, which is another great sign of partnership that we have. We've really emphasized career readiness as part of as our transition, one of our transition points here. So rather than focusing on traditional student services, we're really focusing on making sure that every student is career ready. They've had leadership training, teamwork training. They've understand and appreciate and have experienced work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and they have data literacy and a wide range of career ready skills, communication skills, and things as well. We've heard from employers, and there's large surveys and studies out there that show that employers are very concerned about employees showing up being career ready on day one, that there's oftentimes employees may have a lot of skills with respect or knowledge with respect to the substance, but being able to work in teams and to show leadership and to communicate properly requires more work. So our emphasis on career readiness is a big shift for us. It's a really important part of our partnership with Montgomery College and MCPS as well. How, from your perspective, from the workforce development perspective, what does this shift mean, or what is the significance of this shift? Is this helpful? Do you see this as driving a kind of maybe change in the way we're approaching workforce development?
I think it's awesome, and I think it's right on par to graduate and push well-rounded candidates into the labor market. One thing that we see a lot is finding a job is part of the battle, but retention and advancement heavily weighs on, I think, those professional development skills that you're teaching. So I think that's amazing. We have a puzzle to placement or serving our customers, and that's academic skills, occupational skills, professional development skills, and professional facilitation. So do you have the academic skills, the basic literacy, numeracy skills to be successful? Do you have the occupational skills, depending on the position? Do you have the soft skills or essential skills, which you're teaching? And the professional facilitation is us as an organization just kind of helping you to bring everything together. So I think your students have the academic skills, they're getting the occupational skills. You all are professionally facilitated. So I think by our model, that rounds it out and makes sure that you have well-rounded graduates that are ready to be successful at the next level. So I think that's what it's going to take across the board. Everybody that's in workforce development, we did a community asset map that revealed 120 organizations that dabble that dabble lightly or heavily in workforce development. And I think for us to truly be competitive, we have to do what USG is doing. We have to focus on creating well-rounded folks that are going out into the world of work. So I commend you on that, and I think it's right on par with what everybody should be doing.
Oh, that's great to hear. We're really fortunate to be aligned with Montgomery College and Montgomery County Public Schools on this as well, towards these career-ready competencies, to have some consensus on that too. So that's great to hear. What do you see as some of the areas where higher education could be more innovative or make more of a contribution to workforce development needs? You know, one of the areas that we've been highlighting in our strategic plan is the need to have academic partners be more integrated with business partners and thinking more holistically together about the degrees and the programs and the credentials that we plan for, and the data sharing that needs to happen as well. And not just calling on employers when it's time for an internship or for a job, but really bringing employers more holistically into the process. It's challenging. And this is an area where our partnership with Worksource Montgomery will be really crucial and really essential. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, you know, how we might improve that partnership, but also what do you see in general as some of the things that higher education needs to be aware of, tuned into, focus on as we go forward?
So I don't want to sound biased, but I am biased too, what we're doing in Montgomery County as a whole. And I think that your strategic planning process, specifically your work pertaining to community wealth building, I think is really on par with what higher education could or should be doing. I think about entrepreneurship. We have so many ideas and passions that could be turned into profitable business models. And I think that with your entrepreneurial lab, I know I'm butchering the name, but you can correct me, please correct me. But I think, you know, labs and spaces like that that offer boot camps and the opportunities for individuals to learn how to turn their ideas and passions into business plans and models that are sustainable, I think are key to really building community wealth. I think that micro credentials and boot camps like the bio boot camp are great opportunities that provide gateways to entry level positions that really pique interest in individuals wanting to go higher in those fields. The bio boot camp is not just about getting into entry level positions. It's about starting a journey in life sciences. And that journey will include post-secondary, whether it's Montgomery College, USG, or whatnot. But the bio boot camp is that spark that'll allow somebody to figure out that, hey, I can do this. And this is the actual pathway to get there. If I could say what may be our biggest opportunity from my perspective, and I think these are natural opportunities, is that we have a unique labor market, I think, you know, with life science being, you know, one of our major economic drivers. And a lot of times in the communities that we serve as a workforce development organization, the pathways are not as defined. And that's a conversation that we've had before and that are being had in a lot of different forms, and work is actually being done to remedy that. But I think that being able to market career pathways and straight line models that are easily digestible for the folks that will be getting into these opportunities, I think is always you know, something that would be welcome. But I think we're on the right track. We're having the right conversations, and I think that you know, we'll just kind of continue to grow from here.
I'm so glad you mentioned pathways, Anthony, because this is also at the heart of our plan. If we want to be able to, you know, deliver to ensure that students leave their educational programs with meaningful employment, you know, I think just as you point out, pathways that empower the choices of all learners and can show a clear direction into a particular career opportunities are so important. So thank you for raising that. And thank you for raising the emphasis on community wealth building as well. I wonder if I'd like to close out and ask you to reflect on one last question. And I'd like to focus on community wealth building, because I think your emphasis on it, it really does, it's a different kind of conversation about economic development in some ways. It really is focusing on the wholeness of the person and the community, and jobs and development and all these things are crucial, but it's also kind of looking more holistically at the, building the strength of a community and keeping wealth within a community so that people have their jobs here, they raise their families here, thinking a little bit differently about how we develop community. Could you reflect a little bit on that last point as we close out about what does community wealth building mean to you and to Worksource Montgomery? And what kind of a shift do you see it signaling, or do you? Maybe you don't see it as signaling a shift.
No, absolutely. In workforce development, when I started, I feel like this was a long time ago, in 2007, when I walked in that job center. It was easy when someone said, I want to be a truck driver. But when someone said, I want to start a business, we were deer in headlights. We didn't recognize 1099 employment, business ownership. It was all about you had to get trained and get a job. And for me, I really believe that pathways to ownership is a way to build community wealth, and to keep wealth in those communities. But I think that folks have to have those opportunities to turn those ideas, as I mentioned, into formidable business entities and so forth. And there's logistics around starting a business, running a business, taxes, and so forth. And the community needs to be educated on that. And the thing I liked about the community wealth building team and process was that one of the strategies that was embedded, if I remember correctly, was listening to the community and providing educational resources and tools and events to the community so that folks could start the journey to entrepreneurship. So I think we are swinging in the right direction. For me, in communities of color, I really believe that pathways to business ownership is one of the primary ways to truly build wealth in your communities and keep wealth in those communities. So I'm glad to see that it starts with listening, educating the community and those individuals that want to start businesses. And I know it'll grow from there, but it has to start with listening to the needs of your community, because we can sit around as a group and we can say what someone else needs, but you really get a different perspective when you actually sit across that person that you're prescribing something to. And I think that was a part of the plan. And that was a part that I was especially proud of. So kudos again to you, USG and UAN, for, I think, a really thorough strategic planning process that really embodied kind of the whole MMF collective impact theory of bringing many stakeholders together to ensure, there's nothing that really slips through the cracks. So that was the long version, but I think entrepreneurship has to be a pillar in community wealth building.
Yeah, I really appreciate you ending on that note of listening, education, and the spark, right? The spark towards entrepreneurship that the great programs with Worksource Montgomery can provide in partnership with so many great partners across the county. So Anthony, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate getting to learning more about Worksource Montgomery. Look forward to all of the partnership work we have ahead, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun, Ann.
Thanks a lot.